We're rolling.
All right. So we're in Daniel 5. And Daniel 5 tells us the end of the great Babylonian Empire, right? By an eyewitness of these events. Daniel was a prime minister in Babylonian Empire, right? So he's a position of power. He was the head of the magicians, the soothsayers, etc., Chaldeans. All right, we see the end of the Babylonian, which was the head of gold, right, in the vision. Amen. And the beginning of the Medo-Persian, which was the arms of silver. Remember the statue?
Yeah.
So Daniel gives eyewitness testimony as prime minister. I just said that. And he has been continually set apart from his culture and his pagan religion by his devotion to God, right? Hasn't Daniel always kind of been off on his own? Like all the Chaldeans are doing their thing. And like Daniel's here alone, a couple friends, you know, all by himself. But here he is. He's over 80 in this one, and he's still set apart. He's still set apart by his faith to God. And again, his life is a picture of what our life should be. And now we see another pagan king. He's acting like a pagan. Okay? But he doesn't have ignorance as an excuse. And we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so he's just partying. This pagan king. That's how this thing starts. He's just like, hey dude, party on, dude. Right? How is that different from our culture we're living in right now? Who has known somebody that lived their whole life like, and that was their whole thing for their whole life? Ah, yeah, they wear shirts with marijuana leaves on them and stuff. What's their God? What do they worship? You know what I mean? Or the guys with the beer bottles on the shirt? Well, what God do you think they worship? Okay? So, the Babylonian Empire had gradually deteriorated, right? Because this is a world empire. I mean, Nebuchadnezzar was a pretty great king, right? He's the first one to conquer the world. So, it entered a state of debauchery, right? It got worse and worse and worse over time. So this chapter gives us insight into what destroys an empire. What destroys an empire? You know, this earth we live on has had a lot of empires, right? Has a lot of nations that have risen and fallen. And they go through a cycle. Once you get all powerful, you get what? You get relaxed. You get weak. You get proud. You think that you did it of your own power. Hey, Josh.
Okay.
So, are there any comparisons to be made? I mean, can we learn anything from this story and apply it to today?
Yes.
I mean, because as we go through the story, we're going to see a lot of things that we're going to make comparisons. So today we're going to do the history of the lesson. And next week we're going to do the application of it. So I just said that. What lessons can we get from it? And what do we see in the first part of chapter 5? Right? Hi. They're in an orgy. They're having a party. You guys, we didn't invent this in America. I don't know if you knew that, but like people have been doing these same basic things forever. Right? Even before the flood, even in the very first times. These people were like sinful, right? If you don't have God, what do you have?
No.
You have Islam. Well, how are you going to spend it? If you don't have any higher calling, you're going to party on, right? What's to stop you? Remember that we're in a natural state of rebellion against God. And what does that mean? That means that without God, we choose what? Ourself. You have to be inspired by something larger than yourself to choose something larger than yourself. Otherwise, you're just going to do whatever you feel like doing. And who are you going to end up worshiping? And whose needs are you going to care about? Right? To learn altruism, you know, our notions of good, all the things we think are good and proper and right, like defending the weak and being just and not cheating, loving people we don't know, right? Holding up people who are weak. These aren't natural notions. These ideas of goodness are not natural to our condition, right? So hi guys.
Hey.
We just,
We can start the lesson now.
yeah, I wish I would have waited like 4 minutes. All right. So we're talking about Daniel 5. Okay. First beginning Daniel 5 starts. It opens up. It's an orgy. Okay. They're having a party. First 4 verses of Daniel 5 are all about a pagan king acting like a pagan king. So it's full of desecration and evil. Okay, it's not just what he does specifically in that room that night in Daniel 5 that gets him. It's like the whole thing. It's an overall thing. They're not. The punishment doesn't come because of what they do in one night. It's no one act that gets them judged, right? It's not one act. It's like a lifestyle. So, would you ever take something that was important to someone else and desecrate it? And what does that mean? How would you do that? Have you ever seen those pictures with the guys burning the American flag? Why are they burning the American flag?
Because they're ignorant.
Well, maybe. But I mean, what are they trying to say?
They hate America?
They need someone to lash out at, don't they? So we're a perceived threat. What, we give them billions of dollars every year. We do everything we can to be their friend. Well, why are they lighting our flag on fire? Right? It's just general rebellion. They're full of hate. They need someone to hate. They need someone to lash out at. Why not us? Right? Has to be someone. Have you ever taken you like some football team like whoever, the Gators? So you take a jersey of the Bulldogs and you light it on fire or something like that. Can you imagine that? Whatever it is people who like football do, right? Those Bulldogs suck or whatever. Right? You want to desecrate their symbols. And that's what they're doing in Daniel 5. Do you think God cared about this foreign king desecrating the objects set apart to worship him? Do you think it was God was like, hey, those are my goblets or whatever? Is that what God cared about? Was God like, oh, you're having an orgy and I don't like that, but oh, you're using my holy implements to do it. I'm going to get you. No, it wasn't just one thing. It wasn't just one thing. That's my point. Okay, so why? Why? And that's what I'm talking about. I mean, here's this pagan king acting like a pagan king. All right, he's having an orgy. But then he calls in to use these objects that were set apart for the worship of God, and he was going to desecrate them. All right, so that's the scene. And does God care when people do evil? What does it look like? What does God? How does that interaction happen? How is it that God is sitting in heaven and hating people doing evil? What about evil does God hate? What makes an action evil? Like, if I steal something from her and I run away and I have it, well, what happens to her? She's hurt, right? She's violated, right? God loves her. And when I hurt her, guess what? God doesn't like it. So there's ramifications of evil. God doesn't like injustice. God doesn't like it when we hurt each other. God likes it when we do what to each other? Love each other, man, because love covers a multitude of sins, right? We know what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to love each other. So I will punish the world for its evil and the wicked for their iniquity. I will put an end to the pomp of the arrogant and lay low the pompous pride of the ruthless. Well, that sounds like a promise to me, right? God is saying eventually, I'm going to put all this right. This is happening for now, but right now I'm separating the wheat and the chaff. Y'all are making a decision, good or evil, so choose. But know that there's consequences, because he's promising to do something, isn't he? Because that's an imperative. Remember, when God gives a command, it's I'm gonna, it means he's gonna. It doesn't mean maybe, right? So, how did Babylon go from the dominant military power in the world to being conquered in only one generation? Because remember, Nebuchadnezzar was the king of the world, right? He literally was the king of the world. He was an absolute monarch, the first one to conquer the known world. So the Lord is known by the judgment he executes. The wicked is snared in the work of his own hands. The wicked shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget God. For the needy shall not always be forgotten. The expectations of the poor shall not perish forever. What does that mean? That means when you accept God, you accept one thing. You accept that ultimately there is justice. You accept that ultimately everything's going to be put right. And all the people who rail against God because they can't understand a God that would send a good person to hell, well, all of a sudden it makes sense, right? There are no good people. We hurt each other all the time. You know, Knights of the Old Code went around and protected the weak. Why'd they do that? What's that born out of? Because that's only born out of one thing. Because evolutionary biology doesn't allow for that. Protecting the weak? What? That's anti-evolution, right?
Survival of the
To hold up justice? That's anti-evolution. If evolution is true, I should go over there and violate the weak every chance I get. Because they got some stuff I want, right? And I'm the strong and I'm the fit, so I'm going to survive. And I'm going to do it by exploiting the weak. So if this notion of right came out of evolutionary biology, guess what it would be? Survival. Period. Rape would not be wrong, because that would just be the strong spreading their seed. Just like the biggest, fastest lion or the biggest, strongest stallion, right? But that's not true, is it? We know what right and wrong is, don't we? And it's not based upon evolution. It's based upon God's law. And what's God's law based upon? God's character. It's God's character, man. God doesn't want you to hurt each other. God doesn't want you to hurt yourself. There's a reason why sin is called sin, because it's bad for you. Because it hurts you. Because it hurts the people around you. Right? Every single commandment, you can go through and see how when you break that commandment, you hurt other people. So, in verse 1 we read, Belshazzar is drunk in front of his lords. What does that mean? Because remember we were talking about how important leadership is? Leadership is important, right? If you hail to some certain leader, and your leader's partying, what are you going to do? You're going to party, man. You're going to party it up. You ever, my hero when I was growing up was James Hetfield, you know? He had long hair, he was in a band, he was cool. So you know what I did? I grew long hair, I got in a band, and I thought I was cool. Guess what? I wasn't. I was lost and evil, and I hurt all the time. I was in misery. I was going through the same growing pains everyone does. I didn't have any direction, man. And I hurt other people because I was violent. I was angry. So, short of having something higher to aspire to that's good, I'm going to aspire to the guy that's my leader. And in this culture, you get to pick your own. Because it's freedom. That's nice, right? But anyway, good old Belshazzar is in front of his lords, 1,000 dudes. He has a big party. Starts out, he's in front of 1,000 of his lords. Probably means they all had girls and whatnot with him. And it says he has wives and concubines there. So they're having an orgy and he's being drunk. He's being a fool. Okay, that's how it starts. For many years, critics of Daniel said there was never such a man called Belshazzar. Therefore, the book is incorrect. There's actually books that say this. Prove, hey, look, the Bible's wrong because there was no such man as Belshazzar. Okay? This was a published thing. The Dead Sea Scrolls straightened a lot of this out. But before the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's oh, and by the way, yeah, this is a good thought. It's interesting how a negative proof, which is a lack of evidence, is compelling to antagonize the Bible, right? They say, since there was no guy named Belshazzar, your whole Bible's wrong, because if there's one thing's wrong, the whole thing's wrong, right? It's proof. Negative proof. That to me is enough. Because I'm basically just supporting an opinion I already have. They say, since I cannot see God, I will not believe in Him. Guess what? You can't see evolution. It's pretend, okay? You need 1 billion years to see it. It's false. The fossil record doesn't bear it out, but they believe in it. Why? Because it supports their opinion, right? So the Christians say, well, even though, and for a long time this was, y'all, this was like 1900 years. Well, even though we can't prove this guy existed, they didn't live in an information age anyway. They just accepted it on faith, didn't they? Aren't there a lot of things we just accept on faith even though we can't see Him? Like, I'm positive God interacts with me, but I can't see Him. I can see His will or His force or feel His spirit, but I can't see Him, can I? So I don't have positive proof of that in the sense of empirical evidence, can I? I can't say, God help me and I can prove it. I can say, I changed and it's because of God, and they say, no, maybe you're delusional. Right? It's how we define our evidence. I just thought that was interesting. That was just me, not the Bible. So, then archaeologists found something called the Nabonidus cylinder, and this proves again that Daniel is historically accurate. Okay, I might be saying that wrong. I'm not sure. But check it out.
Never.
They found something that proves there was a dude that the Bible said there was, right? Here he is, a real guy. This thing has a record of him. These are, can't say it very good, but these are, you know, the Sanskrit things. Their old language.
Cuneiform?
Yeah, cuneiform. Thanks, John. So, anyway, it just proved it was true. So who was this guy? Who was Belshazzar, right? Or Belshazzar? He was a decadent, depraved, degenerate, and full of debauchery. And I like the alliteration, see? I made that up. He was decadent, depraved, degenerate, and full of debauchery. I bet if I was a rapper, I'd be like, decadent, yo, depraved, yo, full of, or whatever. So 70 years have passed since Daniel 1. Okay, Daniel 1, what happened? Daniel 1. Nebuchadnezzar went in to conquer Judah, right? But he left it standing. He took prisoners, right? Daniel and his pals. And he raided the temple, took all the holy objects, yes. And to conquer, to show that his God was superior. and he took them off with him to Babylon in chains to teach them Babylonian custom and language, so that then through them he could go and establish his own government in Judah. Remember, that's how they ruled at the time, right? So in chapter 4, God broke Nebuchadnezzar. Remember? What did he do? He gave him
A warning and then
a warning. That's right. And then he gave him something called clinical lycanthropy. Okay? That's what he had. That's what we would call it now. If somebody thought they were an animal and they ate grass, which it happens, it's called lycanthropy. Sometimes people think they're werewolves, and guess what? No such thing as a werewolf, okay? I don't care how many movies you see where the people go and they... Not true. Not true. Although there is something called lycanthropy, which makes people think that they're werewolves, okay? These other fools, and we can give a witness to this, who think they're vampires. Okay, idiot. You're not a vampire. You just haven't been in the sun for a really, 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 really long time, okay? You're not... Take the white paint off. Okay? But there's a lot of gothic people out there. They're suffering from delusions, man. They think they're freaking vampires. Really? How lost are you, man? It makes me sad, but... So Nebuchadnezzar died. He reigned 43 years, and 7 of those years he had clinical lycanthropy, which I looked that word up for y'all, and I felt real good about it. So, Daniel doesn't record what happens during the subsequent years, but history does. Okay, this didn't happen in a vacuum. You know one of the ways we verify that Jesus is true and real and the Bible's right? At least for me, because remember I was a huge skeptic. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. There's other people recording the same events, right? It isn't. The Bible's not the only record we have of this. There's a lot of historians that went and researched all this at the time. Okay? So it doesn't happen in a vacuum. So Nebuchadnezzar was followed by a son called Amel Marduk. He was also called Evil Merodach. Now when you're a king, especially an evil king, you are associated with certain gods. And when you're associated with one god, you have one name, and when you're associated with a different god, you have a different name. Okay? So Evil Merodach and Amel Marduk are the same guy. Now, what did Evil Merodach do? Evil Merodach is mentioned twice in the Bible. 2 Kings 25 and Jeremiah, didn't quite fit on the screen, 5 something. So, he reigns for just 2 years and he's assassinated by his brother-in-law. He gets killed. Because if you want to be the king, what do you have to do?
kill boy.
You got to kill the king. Only one guy gets to be king. It's not like, it's pretty exclusive. It's a hard job to get. So, then his assassin, Nerglisser, was really angry about being named after a cough medicine, and he reigned only for 4 years.
Was he really named after?
Nerglisser? No, not really. I just think it sounds like Nerglisser. That's something you would take if your throat hurt, right? Give me some Nerglisser here. Anyway. So he reigned for only 4 years. He's mentioned in Jeremiah 39 under the name of Nergal-Sharezer. And these two guys play minor roles in the biblical record, okay? Again, there was other stuff happening. Daniel wrote Daniel's book with his own scroll, his own pen. And meanwhile, at the same time, Jeremiah was being written. There were other people making an account, okay? So these guys fall into the biblical record, and we know they happened between, okay? So, he was followed by a son named Labishi Marduk.
Nabishi.
And that poor little boy with a terrible name lasted only 9 months, right? Only 9 months. And then he was beaten to death by conspirators. Now, you know, you guys, when you're out beating children to death, and you, wait a second, they beat him to death. That's terrible. Who can do that to a little kid? Even if he was mean. Even if his name was Labishi. I can't see it. So out of the conspiracy came a king named Nabonidus, who reigned 17 years until being defeated by Cyrus of the Medes and the Persians.
Who had a normal name?
Cyrus.
Nabonidus, I guess that's right. I don't know, I heard the name pronounced, I can't remember now. Okay, by Cyrus of the Medes and the Persians. Now Cyrus was a great king. Cyrus was a great king. He was like Nebuchadnezzar. He was a great king. He was historically epic. He's recorded by a lot of people. He did a lot of stuff. It was Cyrus who defeated the Babylonian Empire. It was Cyrus who conquered the world. Cyrus was the next king to conquer the world. Okay? And according to the king, what gives him the right to rule others? Now, if you're the king, what are you going to use as a justification for your rule? Right? if I'm the king, and by the way, we know this absolutely about ancient Babylon, they combined religion with politics. And the king wasn't just the king was God, okay? Or, little g, God. He thought he was a god, whatever. All right, he was all puffed up. That's where the ancient mystery religions came from. We're still telling each other what our astrology is now. Like, I'm a Cancer, what does that mean? Who cares? But they knew. Because it comes from the ancient mystery religions. They worship the heavenly bodies. And by the way, I just heard again that Islam and Christianity are the same. And we worship the same God. No. Islam comes from Sabianism. It was born out of the mystery religions. Okay? Allah is the moon god of a tribe that Muhammad was born in. Okay? He's the ancient moon god. It's not the same God. It's not. And just because he recognizes Abraham and Jesus as prophets, that doesn't mean anything. He spoke with no authority. He was uninspired. God doesn't pick people who do things he did, okay? It's not the same. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So according to the king, what gives him the right to rule others? If I'm the king, how am I going to justify that to you? I'm standing here, I got my scepter.
Oh my God.
Well, God wants me to do this, right? It's my family, it's my blood. I have a divine right to rule you. Something that you can't understand and you can't rule. You can't question, you can't dispute it. And by the way, when I die, my son has the right. So what gives me the right as a king to pass that to my son? Well, it's my blood. It's my royal line, right? We're American. We can't even hardly believe that. We wouldn't accept that for a minute. Be like, you're my king because, like, you have royal blood? Kabam! Come on. We're not putting up with that. No way, not for a second. We don't believe in that. But they did, okay? They did. So what gives the government the right to rule over you, by the way, in our system? Does the government have a right to rule you?
Not unless we allow them to.
According to our founding documents, God alone rules over you. And our government can't do anything that you can't do. If you can't go to your neighbor and steal his stuff, neither can the government. That's what our founding documents say, because those dudes were all Christians. Okay? We have a very lopsided notion of this, and we're getting worse and worse and worse, further and further off track. Guess what? Nobody rules me but God. God, anybody else I choose to follow or believe in or obey. Period. Now, do I have certain principles in the Bible that tell me to be under their authority? Yeah. Yeah, I do. So, it's God that puts everything in order. But ultimately, my master alone is Jesus Christ. Alone. First. He's first. Everybody else is second, and that's true for everyone here. God first, everyone else second. So, anyway. Being of royal blood gives a man claim to the throne. And now, Nabonidus had none. He didn't have royal blood. He was just some guy who killed the king. Right? He was born out of a conspiracy. So, he goes, now he's going to be king. Right? Now, what do the people think about that? Wait a second, that guy's not even related. He's not, Nebuchadnezzar's son. He can't be king. So the children who had claimed the throne had been assassinated. They killed these children of Nebuchadnezzar who stepped forward. They'd been assassinated. And in order to firm up his position as monarch, Nabonidus married into the royal family. It was either a widow of Nebuchadnezzar or a daughter. Okay? Because that gives you royal claim, doesn't it? If you marry the princess, what are you?
Prince.
You're the prince. If you marry the queen, what are you?
Queen.
You're the king, sure. They have royal blood. You're married in, now you're good, right? It kind of firms up your position. Because one of their sons from Nebuchadnezzar was named Belshazzar. Okay, he had royal blood. So this guy, Nabonidus, was apparently a pretty good guy. He was very religious. He was from a priestly line. Okay, and there's always a power structure. Always. Like, when you go to try to work your way into a system, there's already a system of power in place. In every church, in every school, in everything, right? People have it all worked out. There's always a hierarchy, because that's how human beings are. We like to know, okay, I'm above you, and she's below me, and he's above me, and right? It's just how we are, and it was no different then. So he marries in, and that gives him this right to the throne. So Nabonidus moves to an area called Thema in the middle of Arabia, a long, long way out from Babylon, and for 14 of his 17 years he never even set steps foot. He says, I'm king, but I'm leaving. That'd be like the president going, all right, I'm president, but I'm not going to Washington, D.C., I'm going to go to Georgia. Because I like Georgia better. Anyway, and I'm still president. So there. Right? It wouldn't happen, you wouldn't think. He almost gets treated like an exile because he doesn't rule from the capital. But he doesn't care. He's a really religious guy. He goes and he builds temples to his own gods. Okay? Because you could be religious and not be worshiping the real God, right? I mean, come on. Our government's full of religious people. They're secular humanists. That's their religion. So in order to secure power in Babylon, he appoints Belshazzar as co-regent, which is co-king. So he leaves the royal family in control in the capital. And he leaves. And that's good enough for him. Apparently this guy isn't really kingly. He's not really ambitious. He doesn't seek to rule the world. He never tries to conquer anyone. He just is happy doing his thing, okay? So, Nabonidus is not a warring king. He was quite really blah, blah, blah. Just said that. He was peaceful and capable, and perhaps he was the actual government. Like the government in England. You know the government in England isn't ruled by the king and queen, right? King and queen just dress up and are rich. They have no power at all. The actual government of England runs England, and then the king and queen just dress up and live in a big fancy palace, right? It's kind of like that. I mean, he leaves Belshazzar in the palace, and he goes and actually runs the country. He runs the army. He's the general of the army. He's in control. He's the man. But Belshazzar is living in the palace. Now, what's Belshazzar doing in the palace? Well, we read that in the first 3 verses of chapter 5, don't we? He's having orgies. So Cyrus of the Medes was the opposite. He was set to conquer the world. Meanwhile, while all this is going on, Cyrus is conquering the world. He is a warring king. Right? He's tough. He's tough. He wins battles. That's what he wants to do. He's dead set on conquering the world. He's Adolf Hitler of his time. So they engaged and destroyed Nabonidus' armies outside of Babylon in a place called Gor. They conquered the armies of Babylon. They were already conquered. When we come into Daniel 5, this has already happened. Alright, this is part of the historical record. And by the way, kings never kill kings. That was one of the benefits. Once you were king, you're good. If they beat up your army, they just took you captive and treated you nice and then sent you on your way. Exiled you. Did you know that? Kind of one of the perks about being a king back in the day. So as we open this chapter of Daniel, the city of Babylon had been under siege for 2 to 4 months. The Medes and the Persians literally surrounded the city, and Babylon's armies have been destroyed. So as we come to this, Daniel doesn't record any of this. But as we come to this chapter, the city is under siege. They're under siege, and they're having a party. Does that make sense?
No.
When your city is surrounded by bad guys and does it make sense? You're going to have a party?
Party? No.
Get drunk?
I guess so. For them, I did.
Alright, well, imagine you that enemy surrounded your country. Can anyone imagine that? That's not really very hard. All I gotta do is watch the news. I mean, come on, our country is surrounded by enemies, man. You know, they're not burning the Canadian flag, but if you only had 1 week to live, what would you do? Because that is the question, right? I mean, okay,
Invade Canada.
we're surrounded by the Medes. The Medes have conquered the world. So what do you want to do about it?
I say we go get pizza.
All right, Reba wants to eat pizza. All right, someone tell me what you would do. You got a week to live. Kevin, what are you gonna do, man?
A week?
A week.
A whole week?
A week.
What do you mean a whole week?
Try to run.
Just a week.
You're not running because your city's surrounded.
Oh, okay. So you're stuck
Find
in
the biggest
America.
and
Is
baddest
that what
gun.
you're saying?
Sure.
Well, yeah, really
Biggest and baddest.
Really?
There's nothing really to do.
I like that answer.
What'd you say?
I like that answer because I think that's exactly the truth. I think if you had a week to live, you'd do exactly what you're doing right now. Maybe you wouldn't work. I mean, maybe take a little time off
Yeah.
work.
I wouldn't work.
But
I'd be like, for you guys.
you would do pretty much what you're
can't
doing.
really do what you want to do because you haven't been like, okay, here in a few months I'm only gonna have a week to live. Let's save up a bunch of money to do things.
Right, you wouldn't be able to plan for it.
You're still gonna be poor and you can't do anything.
All right, so you wouldn't like spend the week at a amusement park because, by the way, all the people that work in the amusement park, they're probably not showing up for work either, you know? I mean, oh, what, the world only has a week to live. Let me go to work and make my bucks an hour, you know? And they're not going either, so. All right, and I think that's the same answer I came up with, by the way. It's the same exact. You would do basically what you're doing now.
So we'd go get pizza.
If you listen.
Probably try to go to Bali or something.
Look, if you live your life in prayer with God, right? then you're going to spend your last week in prayer with God. But if you live your life partying hard and smoking bong hits, you're going to spend your last week partying hard and smoking bong hits. I mean, what else are you going to do? Change? People rarely change, and people don't change in their own authority or power. People need something else to inspire them. They need to aspire to something greater than themselves to change. So if you had a week to live, you'd pretty much do the same thing. Now, your leaders are dealing with it by having a drunken party. Who among you believes that Washington, D.C. is full of people who are actually trying to solve our problems? Oh, none? No one? Okay. I guess they're not. Okay? They're not. They're not. I promise. They're having vacations and playing golf and whatnot and like living in mansions and, I don't know, eating pate or whatever it is rich people eat. So,
I saw togas there.
King Belshazzar, now here we go, here's the actual text. King Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in front of the 1,000. Belshazzar, and by the way, when he tasted the wine, this means he was drunk. The implication is that he was drunk. Commanded that the vessels of gold and silver that Nebuchadnezzar his father had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem be brought, that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought in the golden vessels that had been taken out of the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. So here they are, they're having this party. He's feeling rebellious. He's lashing out. He doesn't have anyone to lash out at, so he burns an American flag. Oh wait, no, I mean he drinks out of the gold and silver vessels.
The goblet.
He's just being defiant, man. He's just being defiant. He wants to rail against somebody. He's unhappy. He knows he's in trouble, so they're going to get drunk. So here he is, his actual picture. And he's like,
he looks a little funny.
hey, watch me. I'm drunk. Ah,
That's why he looks funny.
everything's fine. Everything's fine. Go back to work. Everything's going to be fine. We got this. We're fine. Okay? Woohoo. All right. So, first notice that when he says that Nebuchadnezzar is Belshazzar's father, it could easily mean grandfather. Like David is the father of Jesus, Hebrew doesn't have a word for grandfather. So in order to say grandfather, you would have to say father's father. Okay? In their language, if you were somebody's father, it just meant that you were their ancestor. Okay? You know, in that context, your father's, that's your father. No, it's not. It's your great-grandfather, but it's the same thing. Okay? So Belshazzar dealt with crisis the same way he dealt with life. He partied, he drank. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Right? Right out of the
What
room.
is that from?
From 1 Corinthians. That was a saying in the time of Paul. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Because right now it's exactly the same. Exactly the same. I can't tell you how many guys I hung out with that had that philosophy. Doing insane and reckless things.
I work with people like that.
I used to have that philosophy.
Absolutely. You only live once. You ever seen a guy say, hey man, you only live once, smoke this? Why? That's insanity. You only live once, bro.
That's my brother's motto.
Right? You only live once. You only live
Got in a car
once.
accident. No!
Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. It's the same exact thing. Party hard. You know? So it's hard to imagine having a drunken orgy while the city is surrounded. But remember, Babylon was formidable, right? It was formidable. Anyone ever heard that America can't be invaded in their life? Who has ever heard somebody, nobody can invade America? We all got guns, man. We got oceans around us.
I have heard of people.
We're the
who do
toughest
that,
country
and
in the
I just
world.
look at them like this.
Yeah, that can't happen here. Come on, that can't happen here. We're special. Really? I mean, we are special, right?
My mommy told me.
Aren't we safe? Right? Nobody really believes
Against
that.
each other.
All right. Well, when 9/11 happened, that kind of changed everybody's opinion too, right?
Wake up.
All right. So this is the actual Babylon. Babylon still exists, you know. The city still exists. This is what it looks like today in Iraq. So never had the walls been breached. The king might have felt secure. Perhaps he just didn't know any other way to behave, which is probably the case, in my opinion. But I don't know that for a fact.
Yeah, it's probably like.
But they were sitting in Babylon. They didn't care about the army surrounding them. The Euphrates River ran right through the center of the city. They had water. They had food. They had walls. They felt safe. Look, we're all right. Let's have a party, man.
They were
can't get us.
complacent. Yes.
Yeah, they were complacent and lazy.
Jason.
Obsessed with what? Feelings. parties and good time and movies. And, oh wait, not movies. The internet. No, all right. So according to the historian Herodotus, Babylon was 15 square miles with 80 walls 87 feet thick. Now why were they so thick? Because they were 350 feet high. It was the most formidable city of its day. And anyone understand like why you would have to have such a thick wall if it was going to be 350 feet high?
Serious enemies.
Oh, but anyone know what that says? Jonathan did.
It says.
Well, they didn't have strong materials. They didn't have steel. So if you're going to build a wall 350 feet high, it has to look like that, doesn't it? To support this weight, it has to be strong down here, and it has to have some sort of interlocking to hold it together, right? Like blocks or something like that, because you're not going to pour that all in one shot. Even we couldn't even do that today. So you would have to build it in sections. All right. So they might have actually said, that can't happen here. This is the Great Babylon. We're good. They can't get us. We're good. We got this. So wouldn't it be tempting to believe that all the power and comfort came from your own work? Or even the statue that you're worshiping? I mean, do you think people think like, oh yeah, America and all this good stuff we have is just because we're so, hardworking. We're so industrious, or we're so smart. I mean, where do all our blessings come from?
Lord.
How come we get to have all this stuff and the rest of the world's like hungry? How come we've never had an empty belly, but like 3/4 of the world are hungry right now? Why?
Because it was founded on God.
Because it was God, man. We were blessed by God. We had covenant with God. This country was founded on God by godly men. This country was pilgrims escaping to worship God in their own way, because when they read the Bible in English, they were dissatisfied with the Church of England. You guys have it all wrong. It's not at all about this. Take off those funny hats. It's not about that. I'm not praying to your statues anymore. I'm not saying your regimented prayers of Hail Mary full of grace. What is that? That's not in here. That's what it was. This country is blessed by the God, living God, God of heaven. God blessed this country. And the further away we get from God, the shakier we get, right? So, why did Belshazzar bother to drink from the sacred items from the Hebrew temple? I think that's pretty interesting, right? And again, I think it boils down to burning that flag. Yeah, he needed to rebel against something. He needed to feel empowered, right? He's the king. He's going to do things his way. He'll show you. So he throws down the gauntlet. He says, you're nothing, God. Watch this. I'll desecrate your deal. So,
Ew.
Oh.
scary, right? Yeah. This is Belshazzar. You have no power over me. I'm in control here. But what's Belshazzar really made out of? Clay. Nothing. We're nothing. We lived this long. That's it. These elements I'm made out of are only empowered by the breath that's been blown into me. Life is amazing. We live in a mostly dead universe. And I mean mostly, like 99.9, a lot of nines. Everything's dead. So what does the Bible say about it? How much control do we really have over our lives as we beat our chests and think we're so smart and build our buildings and make our cars and work our jobs and struggle? How much control? James 4:14 says, yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then it vanishes. That's it. This is illusory. We have the illusion of control over our life. That's all. If we choose to do evil, guess what? That's it. And when you're high and all that, guess what? You're not happy. People who choose to worship themselves are generally miserable people.
Mike, I think it's important that you read on. The next verse says, instead you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. I like
Okay.
that.
All
Just
right.
carries it out.
So the Bible goes on to say, don't do this. The king is having a party. He's up in front of the crowd overseeing the debauchery, and he decides to mock God. Hey, bring in those vessels that God that my father worshipped. Because, by the way, Nebuchadnezzar, if you bump into him in heaven and say, hey, I heard about you in Sunday school. I knew you'd be here. Nice to meet you, dude. Okay? Because God saved Nebuchadnezzar. Probably. Almost for sure, though. He knew about the history of Nebuchadnezzar, and he knew about God, okay? He didn't do this. His life also was not in a vacuum. He knew about these stories. He knew his dad. He watched his dad or granddad get all crazy and eat grass for a while, okay? He knew. He heard him exalt God afterward because it was a royal edict. Everybody heard it. You didn't get to ignore Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar has some authority. When he said, bah, you went, okay? Because he killed people all the time. He was a tyrant, man. So his sin was not in ignorance. He challenged God. He shook his fist at the sky and screamed blasphemy. Okay, he did not sin in ignorance. And it's different. If you sin in ignorance, that's one thing, okay? Because you don't know what's wrong. What does the law say? Once I found out it was wrong, I want to do it even more, okay? So he wasn't not in ignorance. He knew about the real God, the most holy God, okay? They worshiped their statues during a drunken orgy devoted to statues. Worship. I don't think that was a very good sentence. Okay, and then this writing appears on the wall, which I didn't have quite right. Right? In Daniel 5:5 it says, immediately the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall in the king's palace, opposite the lampstand, and the king saw the hand as it wrote. And that was the face he made. Why did he make that face?
I'm dead.
Pretty much.
He was like, did you guys see that? Because what do we do now? Hold on, I thought I was the king of the universe in here, and all of a sudden now I'm seeing something I cannot explain. All of a sudden I'm being confronted with something bigger than me, stronger than me. All of a sudden he's feeling like he's this, right? So then the king's color changed and his thoughts alarmed him. His limbs gave way and his knees knocked together. The king called loudly to bring the enchanters, the Chaldeans, and the astrologers. The king declared to the wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and shows me its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Now, first ruler was already gone, but still had to acknowledge him, right? What is royal purple? What does purple mean?
Royalty.
Royalty, that's right. Royal is a purple color. Purple is a royal color. Gold. What is gold? Especially in Babylon. It's the most valuable thing. The king owns all the gold. Okay? Gold thing around your neck, that's something. That's like driving a limo and, I don't know, getting an Oscar. Okay, that's huge. And his knees knocking together. He's freaked out. He's completely freaked out. He's like, hey, you guys, come tell me what this means. So, when does Judgment Day come? Does anyone know? Anyone know? Judgment Day?
When you least expect it?
Maybe. So, what's the reason to fear death? Because I'm not afraid of death. Who's afraid of death? Right? I mean, I'm really. Jesus come tomorrow, that'd be fine with me. I'm good to go. I don't think I'm perfect either. I don't think I'm good. None of that. I just think I belong to Him. Okay? And do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear Him who can destroy both body and soul in hell. Right? Who's he saying? Satan here?
God.
No, he's saying God. God. Don't fear the devil. Fear God. God has this whole thing in control. God has the reins. This is God's universe. This is God's world. This is God's day. And I am God's man. Fear God means you respect Him with a healthy fear. Not like, oh, I'm so scared. But like I revere you type of fear. Okay? For you did not receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear. Bad fear. But you have received the spirit of adoption as sons by whom we cry, Abba, Father. Okay? So what kind of fear is he talking about? Here, we use the same word twice. Does it have the same meaning? Because one of them is the fear of like, I'm scared of Freddy Krueger. Okay? The other one is the fear of like love and respect.
Reverence.
Reverence. Okay? We are to call him Abba, Father, which is a very
Endearing.
intimate term. which means we are to know him intimately. Which means God, the maker of the universe, wants to know you intimately. And when you know God intimately, guess what? Death isn't scary anymore. I'm good to go, man. I hope somebody walks out that door right now and says, deny Jesus or die. I'm going to be like, yes. Thank you for making it so easy. Right? Unfortunately, I don't think it probably will be, but heck, man, that'd be okay. Because 1 second later, I'm with my Lord, man.
Amen.
So that's the difference. He is terrified of death. Whereas a Christian, death has lost its sting. And the more you know God, the more assurance you have of that. Knowing God and having a relationship with him makes you comfortable in that, you know? Know God. He loves you. Call him Abba, Father. So the king is sitting by the lampstand, and it's all about him, right? By the way, where do you put spotlights if it's all about you? On you, man. On you, right? I mean, it's all about him, and the writing appears on the plaster of the wall. So the critics of Daniel claimed, of course, that there was no plaster at that time. This was used as evidence that Daniel must have been written a forgery from a later time, right? Because later on they had plaster. So they said, oh, Book of Daniel, can't be true. They didn't have plaster until whenever, 180 or something. So it's wrong. It's false. That proves it. See? It's false. Is that compelling evidence? Of course, a lot of this is all pre-Dead Sea Scroll, but then the archaeologists called away who excavated Babylon reported finding a room 55 by 169 foot with plaster walls and a niche that was elevated in the center of a wall right in the palace.
Whoa.
Yeah, how about that? Guy does an excavation, he finds the friggin' throne room right out of Daniel, man. With what? Plaster walls. So this was the guy, because he lived before pictures. They just made a painting of him. Please forgive.
Are those wires?
And this is, what they did was a reconstruction of the gate. This is in Germany. It's a recreation of the Ishtar Gate based on the excavations from the 1930s. So they actually got this and recreated it. You can go see this right now. And supposedly this is the excavated gate. They took it. By the way, Europeans used to go and steal all the stuff from like the old sites in Europe. I mean, Egypt and everywhere. They'd be like, oh, yeah, this is great stuff, man. So, really killer stuff in the museum in England and also in Germany. So, why was the king so afraid? Kind of beating a dead horse here, but why was he so terrified? Why was it? Because death is scary if you don't know God. He knew he was mocking God. He knew it. He knew it. It was not a sin of ignorance. He was having a party, man. Woohoo! Let's drink out of these. See, no, God can't hurt me. Haha, I'm the king. Alright? And he knew he was sinning. Do you think people who are like sinning know they're sinning even if they don't know God? Do you have to know? Do you have to read that it's wrong to murder somebody to know it's wrong to murder somebody? I mean, come on. He knew that the city was surrounded. He knew it. Okay? This was a terrifying time for him. And all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or make known to the king the interpretation. Then King Belshazzar was greatly alarmed, and his color changed, and his lords were perplexed. Now what happens to you when you get really afraid and your color changes, right? Haven't seen anyone get pale before? Fear? Or flushed? With like terror? Right? Excuse me. If you were the wise man, what would you have said? Because I know what I would have said. King calls me in. He still has power now. He's still the king. He can still order me dead. So king calls you in. Hey, come, tell me what it means. What do you say?
All right.
What do you say? Well, you say as little as possible. You don't say anything at all. You be really quiet. That's it. You say nothing. Because you don't want to be the guy to be wrong at this point. You know the city's surrounded. You see the writing on the wall, right? You see things coming. You see the future is coming. You just be quiet. They didn't offer any explanation. Okay? Who knows? Maybe they could read Aramaic. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe they just didn't know what it meant. Maybe they did. But they chose to keep it shut. Which is exactly what I would have done. Because after all, they are wise men, right? So, the queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banquet hall, And the queen declared, O king, live forever. Let not your thoughts alarm you, or your color change. There is a man in your kingdom, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. In the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, made him chief of the magicians, enchanters, Chaldeans, and astrologers, because an excellent spirit, knowledge, and understanding to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve problems were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. Okay? So then Daniel was brought in before the king. The king answered and said to Daniel, You are that Daniel, one of the exiles of Judah, whom the king my father brought from Judah. I have heard of you, that the spirit of the gods is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now the wise men, the enchanters, have been brought in before me to read this writing and make known to me its interpretation, but they could not show the interpretation of the matter. But I have heard that you can give interpretations and solve problems. Now if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around your neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Which is basically the best thing he can give. I mean, I don't know what it would be in modern terminology, like $1 billion, zillion dollars, and whatever.
How many years later is this after everything that happened with Nebuchadnezzar?
70 years after they were taken out of exile, and 23 years since the last chapter.
Okay.
So, Daniel answered and said before the king, Let your gifts be for yourself, and give your rewards to another. Nevertheless, I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. That's pretty awesome. Seems to me we need more people like that in our culture, right?
Yes.
How many people like Daniel do we have in our culture? Name a politician you believe in.
No.
Oh, none?
They all want something.
Oh, I see. Not a single one? Isn't that depressing? Well, how about a businessman? You think you could call him businessman?
Oh, they want
You
something?
believe him? Yeah, me neither. How about an athlete? Raise your hand. I'll call you a sucker. Please, man, we need people like this. We need people with honor that will say the truth regardless. They don't care. And maybe it has something to do with him being 80, but I don't think so, because he spoke the truth before. The only thing he did different this time than when he spoke to Nebuchadnezzar is he didn't bother to say, "Oh, king, live forever." Because the king wasn't going to live forever. Okay, he knew. Daniel knew. He get right in his face. We need people like Daniel. I hope y'all are people like Daniel, okay?
Oh.
So what did Daniel say? It was hard to find a picture of Daniel. He said, I serve something greater than you. I don't need your money. I don't need your robe. I don't need your necklace. I don't care about being the third ruler in the kingdom, okay? I serve something greater than you. I have a higher calling, a higher purpose. You are number 2, pal. And I don't care if you're the king and you're drunk in orgy. I disapprove of all of this, right? Give that robe to one of those Chaldeans, because, buddy, you're all done. You're done, man. And by the way, you're not going to live forever. So, here we go, all right? How much time I got left?
It's 1 minute.
1 minute, so I guess we'll just pray.
What?
I can't keep going. I mean, I would. Don't get me wrong.
I don't have to work till 2.
Reba and I want to stay till 2.
All right, let's pray. Heavenly Father, God, we exalt you, we thank you, we praise you, we honor you. We pray you grow us all in faith each day. Light a fire in us, a holy fire, that we may seek you and your righteousness, speak truth in love to all those around us, that we may have a defense for the hope that we have, that you are with us each day, all day long.